Their network was collapsing. Human hackers saved the system, while aliens cheered in awe. Cade Chen's fingers froze over his keyboard. 3 years. 3 years of perfect invisibility in the shadow servers of Nexus Station. And now this. A 7-year-old Luminari child, her distinctive bioluminescent markings flickering with terror, trapped at a public terminal in Sector 9, while security drones closed in like mechanical vultures. He should look away. He'd spent 1,000 nights perfecting the art of not caring. But those markings, he recognized them. Silya, daughter of High Consul Varith, the Luminari diplomatic representative who oversaw the entire station network. And she wasn't lost. She was running. The distress codes she frantically typed into that terminal were advanced. Military grade. A child shouldn't know them. The drones were 10 seconds from her position. Cade's jaw clenched. His hands moved before his brain could stop them, fingers flying across his interface in the dark of his hidden server room. Reroute command protocols. Wipe her location signature. Scramble the drone recognition matrix. The security grid buckled under his assault, and on his monitor he watched the drones veer away, their targeting systems suddenly blind. The girl disappeared into a maintenance corridor. Cade exhaled, his heart hammering. Stupid, reckless. That hack had just lit him up like a flare to anyone with the skill to trace it. His door hissed open 53 minutes later. He spun, pulse pistol already in his hand. But the woman standing in his doorway wasn't station security. She was Luminari, tall and elegant, her skin shifting through shades of deep blue and silver, her bioluminescent patterns glowing with controlled intensity. She wore the formal robes of a high consul, but her eyes, large, multifaceted, and currently locked on him, burned with something far more primal than diplomacy. Desperation. Cade Chen, High Consul Varys said, her voice melodic but strained. The Ghost Protocol. I need you. Behind her, small fingers clutched at her robes. Syl peered out, her luminescence dim with exhaustion and fear. Cade didn't lower his weapon. You've got the wrong guy. I'm just a data runner. You're a liar. Varith stepped inside, and the door sealed behind her. You built the Cerberus Protocol for Earth's defense fleet. You were the best security architect in 3 systems before they erased you. And 12 hours ago, you saved my daughter with a hack that should have been impossible. Her voice cracked. Nexus Station is dying. The entire infrastructure, life support, trade systems, defense grids is collapsing. My people's best technicians can't stop it. I traced your rescue hack back to this room because I'm out of options. Cade's gut twisted. Get someone else. There is no one else. The infection spreading through our network is killing us. And I believe whoever planted it tried to silence my daughter because she saw something in the code. Varith's luminescence flared, a luminary stress response. I can offer you immunity, resources, safety for both you and Syl, but only if you save this station. Cade looked past her at the child. Syl's eyes met his, wide and trusting, and he saw it. The same look his fiancée had given him 3 years ago, right before Cerberus locked down and turned her battle group into a tomb. He'd sworn he'd never use his skills again, never let anyone depend on him, but he holstered his weapon. Show me the network, he said. Within minutes, he was jacked into the main network from Varith's diplomatic suite, a bubble of sterile opulence that felt alien and wrong. Code cascaded across his holographic interface, a digital waterfall of pure chaos. In the corner of the suite, Syl sat curled on a plush divan, clutching a small, multifaceted data crystal to her chest, her luminescent patterns pulsing in a slow, fearful rhythm. Cade dove into the station's dying heart. The infection wasn't a random virus. Viruses are messy, chaotic. This was elegant, a precisely engineered cascade of failures, each one triggering the next like a line of dominoes. It was designed to look like a system-wide breakdown, a catastrophic but natural event. But beneath the noise, Cade saw the real purpose. Tiny, encrypted packets of data, control protocols for navigation, life support, defense, were being siphoned off, rerouted to a single shielded external source. This wasn't a sickness. It was a decapitation. Someone was stealing the station's brain. He ripped his neural link out. This isn't an infection, he stated, turning to Vareth. It's a heist. Someone is hijacking the entire station. Vareth's own luminescence flickered, her composure cracking. Then we are worse off than I feared. She paced the room, her robes whispering against the floor. Nexus Station is more than a trading hub, Cade. It is the cornerstone of the Luminary Human Alliance Treaty, a symbol. There are dozens of factions on both sides who see our cooperation as a threat. They would celebrate its failure. Her voice dropped. If this station falls, the treaty dies with it, and our two species lose everything we have built in this sector. A small voice cut through the tension. The bad light man. Both Cade and Vareth turned. Syl was on her feet, her small face a mask of certainty. Her glow intensified. I saw him, in Mama's office, 3 days ago. Vareth knelt beside her daughter. Syl, what are you talking about? The bad light man, she repeated, her voice trembling but firm. He wasn't glowing. His light was on a box. He was touching the walls on the restricted terminals. Cade's blood ran cold. The technical data, the political motive, and now this. A witness. A witness who saw someone inside the most secure office on the station, accessing terminals no one but the High Consul should be able to touch. This wasn't an attack from the outside. It was a betrayal from within. Someone with diplomatic clearance had just handed their enemies a weapon. He was close. He could feel the infection's core, a knot of malicious code buried deep in the life support subroutines. His fingers flew, weaving a digital quarantine, a firewall of his own design, meant to isolate the malignant code before it could poison the rest of the station. For a moment, a flicker of hope. He could contain it. Then the wall to the diplomatic suite didn't open. It vanished in a flash of white heat and a concussive boom that threw him from his chair. Through the smoke and ringing in his ears, they emerged. Not aliens, humans. 6 of them, clad in matte black combat armor, their faces hidden behind polarized visors. They moved with the cold, efficient economy of professional soldiers. Mercenaries. 2 of them immediately opened fire on his holographic interface, shattering the cascading code into a million useless shards of light. 3 more fanned out, their rifles leveling not on Vareth, but on the corner where Syl was hiding. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to erase the evidence and the witness. But they made one mistake. They thought Cade was just a hacker. 3 years of rust couldn't erase a decade of Black Ops training. As the mercenaries advanced on Syl, Cade was already moving. He slammed his hand onto a panic panel beside Vareth's desk, not a security alarm, but a direct environmental control override. The suite's smart systems were now his weapon. Seal doors, he yelled, and the reinforced entry behind the mercenaries slammed shut with a bone-jarring clang. A red light flashed on their helmets as Cade hijacked their comms, flooding their tactical displays with blinding static. One of them raised his rifle, but a hiss from the other side of the room drew his attention. Vareth was no longer a diplomat. She was a mother protecting her child. A thin, elegant plasma projector had materialized in her hand, and the air around her crackled. Her bioluminescence, once a soft, calming blue, now blazed a furious, incandescent white. She fired, a bolt of searing energy catching one of the mercenaries in the chest, his armor melting like wax. Corridor 7, vent atmosphere, Cade commanded into his wristcom, and a secondary blast door the mercs had been trying to cut through suddenly hissed open, sucking the air from the hallway behind them. They were trapped. Blinded. Vareth's plasma bolts pinned them down while Cade, using the last vestiges of his system access, turned their own technology against them, shorting out their weapon power cells one by one. The fight was brutal, close, and over in 40 seconds. Silence returned, thick with the smell of ozone and melted metal. They had survived, but as Cade scrambled back to his ruined console, a single critical alert pulsed on a cracked monitor. The assault wasn't just an attack, it was a diversion. While they fought for their lives, the infection had broken his quarantine. A system-wide broadcast scrolled across the screen in blood-red text. Warning, catastrophic life support failure. Habitation rings 9, 10, and 11 offline. His blood ran cold. They had just accelerated the collapse. The stakes were no longer just the station's control. They were now counting lives by the thousand. The station groaned around them, a wounded beast settling into its death throes. They had found shelter in the maintenance core, a forgotten maze of humming conduits and weeping pipes deep in the station's iron skeleton. Sparks showered from a severed power line as Cade worked, his movements frantic, soldering iron hissing as he tried to resurrect his shattered interface from a pile of scavenged parts. Every tremor of the deck plating was a reminder of the thousands of lives now blinking out in the lower rings. A deep metallic shriek echoed from above, and Vareth flinched, her composure finally cracking. The incandescent fury from the fight had cooled, leaving behind a brittle, exhausted terror. "They will use this," she whispered, her voice strained. "The doubters on my council, they already see humans as a chaotic, destructive force. This will be all the proof they need to sever the treaty. They will say our alliance was a mistake." Cade didn't look up from the delicate circuit he was splicing. He knew all about mistakes. "They're not wrong," he said, the words tasting like ash. "My skills, they don't fix things. They just break them in new ways." He finally met her gaze, his own eyes haunted. "3 years ago, I built a system for Earth's defense fleet, the Cerberus Protocol, an unbreachable shield. A traitor used my own code, my own back doors to turn that shield into a cage. He locked down an entire battle group and vented their life support." He held up his right hand, the knuckles a roadmap of pale, jagged scars. 350 people. My fiancé was the communications officer on the flagship. I was blamed, court-martialed in secret and erased from the records. I've been running ever since because I learned the truth. Everything I build eventually becomes a tomb. The silence that followed was heavier than the groaning metal. He expected pity, or worse, fear. He didn't expect the soft, hesitant touch. Syl had approached without a sound. She stood beside his workbench, her large dark eyes fixed on his scarred hand. Slowly she reached out and placed her small, glowing fingers over his knuckles. It wasn't just a touch. Through the contact, a wave of pure, unadulterated emotion flooded him. A sensation unique to the luminary. There was no judgment, no fear, just a child's absolute, unwavering belief. A simple, profound certainty that he was the one who would keep them safe. The feeling was so overwhelming, so foreign after years of self-loathing, that it stole his breath. He looked from her glowing hand to Vareth, who watched the moment with an expression of stunned reverence. In her eyes, he no longer saw a diplomat assessing a tool. He saw a woman looking at the man who her daughter trusted with her life, and in that shared gaze a bond was forged, something far deeper and more dangerous than a simple alliance. Syl's touch had been a jolt of lightning to his soul, scorching away the ghosts of his past. The self-loathing, the guilt, it was all still there, but it was no longer in command. With renewed, ferocious clarity, Cade dove back into the cascading chaos of the station's code. The infection was a masterpiece of destruction, elegant and cruel. But as he peeled back its layers, a chilling familiarity began to creep over him. He knew its shape. He knew its logic. He knew the ghost of its architecture because he had been its god. "No," he breathed, his fingers freezing over the interface. Vareth looked up, sensing the change in him. It can't be. It was Cerberus, twisted, corrupted, and weaponized, but unmistakably his. Someone had stolen his life's work, the shield he built to protect, and reforged it into a sword. The rage that followed was cold and absolute. This wasn't just an attack on the station. It was an attack on him, a desecration of his legacy and his failure. He worked with a predator's focus now, hunting the ghost of another programmer through his own creation. The modifications were clever but arrogant. A digital trail of breadcrumbs, hidden in redundant subroutines, led him back to a single encrypted diplomatic server. He shattered the encryption. A name materialized on the screen: Ambassador Torvin, a human, one of the treaty's most vocal champions. But there was something else. A sleeper protocol buried deep in the infection's core, set to activate on a hidden timer. It wasn't designed to just crash the network. Cade ran the simulation, his blood turning to ice as the results scrolled across his monitor. "It's not just trying to shut the station down," he said, his voice flat with horror. Vareth moved to his side. In 48 hours, the infection will bypass every safety protocol and overload the fusion reactor core. He brought up a stellar map, a cold dread settling in his gut. A single, slow-moving vessel was on a direct intercept course with the station's blast radius. There's a luminary colony ship, the Stellaron, passing through this sector. 10,000 civilians. Vareth's luminescent markings flickered and went dim. Genocide, she whispered. Cade nodded, the final, horrifying piece clicking into place. They're not just destroying the station, they're turning it into a bomb to slaughter your people and blame it on a system failure. It's a false flag, the perfect excuse to start a war. He looked at her, the trap closing around them. And we can't tell anyone. Torvin has allies everywhere. The second we go public, he'll just hit the button and trigger it early. The plan was insane. It was desperate. It was his only shot. Cade paced the small maintenance core, the hum of failing systems a constant drumbeat of doom. I can't just defuse it, he explained, his voice sharp with adrenaline. Torvin will have a dead man's switch. The second his control is threatened, he'll trigger the detonation. I have to get inside his system without him knowing. He pointed to a schematic he'd projected onto the grimy wall. I'll build a mirror virus. It won't attack his code. It'll mimic it, burrowing inside his external control node and siphoning all his communications, his logs, everything. It'll give us the evidence we need and buy us time to find a way to shut down that reactor for good. Vareth's expression was grim. The Central Diplomatic Network Core. That's the only place with enough bandwidth to deploy something like that without being detected. And where is that? Cade asked, already knowing the answer would be terrible. In the floor of the council chamber, she said. And Torvin just called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. His official reason is to coordinate an evacuation of essential personnel. He's getting his co-conspirators off the station before he blows it up. She met his eyes, her own luminescent gaze hardening with resolve. I have to be there, and you'll be with me, disguised as my technical attaché. The night before was a tomb of silence. Syl slept on a makeshift cot, her small chest rising and falling, her bioluminescence a soft, peaceful pulse in the darkness. The station groaned around them, a dying beast. Vareth stood near the viewport, staring out at the starfield. I've spent my career navigating the politics of mistrust, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Convincing my people that humanity was worth the risk, that you weren't all just chaos and self-interest. She turned to him, her light flickering with an emotion he couldn't name. Then I see you. You who had every reason to stay hidden, to let my daughter be taken. You fight for her with a ferocity I've only ever seen in a parent. You look at her, and you don't see an alien. You see a child who needs protecting. She crossed the small space between them and gently touched the back of his hand, her fingers cool against his scarred skin. I was wrong. It's not chaos. It's a fire, a fierce, protective fire, and it's beautiful. Her touch, her words, they dismantled the last of his walls. He'd been a ghost, a tool, a weapon. But she saw a man. Hesitantly, he turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. The connection was electric, a current of understanding passing between them. He pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her jaw. Her skin was like cool silk, and the light from her markings cast shifting patterns across his face. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. The kiss was not one of desperation, but of discovery. It was human warmth against luminary grace, his rugged, broken past meeting her brilliant, hopeful future. For one perfect stolen moment, there was no countdown, no conspiracy, no war. There was only this, a reason to live, a reason to fight, a reason to see the dawn. The suit felt like a cage. As Vareth's technical attaché, Cade was meant to be invisible, a ghost in a crisp uniform, but every eye in the council chamber felt like a searchlight. The air was thick with the manufactured calm of powerful people on the verge of panic. At the central dais, Ambassador Torvin spoke of orderly evacuation, of regrettable necessities. His voice was a soothing poison. Vareth, a pillar of radiant calm, rose to challenge him. Ambassador, her voice cut through the chamber, Your proposal to evacuate only select personnel suggests you've already accepted defeat. Nexus Station is not a sinking ship to be abandoned. It is a home to be saved. It was Cade's cue. While all eyes were on the political theater, he slipped behind a bank of server racks and dropped through a maintenance hatch into the network core beneath the chamber floor. The world above vanished, replaced by a spiderweb of glowing fiber optic cables and the low hum of raw data. This was his true element. He jacked his custom interface into the main trunk line, his fingers a blur across the holographic console. He wasn't just a hacker, he was a surgeon, and the station was his patient. The mirror virus, his masterpiece of digital mimicry, unspooled into the system, a silent predator hunting for its prey. Seconds later, the data came pouring in. It was more damning than he could have imagined. Encrypted communications, coded financial transfers, a three-way conspiracy between Torvin, a radical human supremacist faction called Terra Ascendant, and a brutal luminary warlord named Kess. The plan was laid bare. Destroy the station, blame it on luminary terrorists, and use the ensuing chaos to ignite a war that would benefit them both. Then a single line of red text flashed on his screen. Counter-intrusion detected. Above him, the chamber exploded. Sirens blared, a piercing shriek that vibrated through the floor. On the main view screen, Torvin's face twisted from political poise to raw fury. He slammed his fist on a hidden console. The screen flickered, then displayed a new, horrifying image. A massive clock, its red numerals stark against the black. Reactor overload in, or 4, where was 0. He triggered the countdown. Heavy mag locks slammed shut on the chamber doors, and side panels slid open, revealing squads of mercenaries. A mix of grim-faced humans in black armor and hulking reptilian Kess loyalists. They weren't station security, they were an execution squad. But before the first shot was fired, Vareth acted. With a single defiant motion, she slammed her hand on her diplomatic console. Cade's screen, all the evidence, every last damning file, was instantly broadcast to every monitor in the chamber, every public terminal on the station. For 3 glorious seconds, the entire conspiracy was exposed for all to see. Then the signal died. Jammed by Torvin's forces, the mercenaries raised their weapons. Vareth drew her plasma sidearm, her bioluminescence flaring like a supernova. "Cade!" she yelled over the rising chaos. "We need to get to the reactor core." Now? The council chamber doors buckled under the first plasma volley as Cade and Vareth plunged into the pandemonium of the station's grand concourse. Alarms blared a dissonant symphony of doom, while citizens, human, luminari, and a dozen other species, scrambled in a tidal wave of panic. Torvin's mercenaries were on their heels, firing indiscriminately into the crowd. Vareth moved with a warrior's grace, her plasma fire a precise defensive shield, while Cade dragged her through the chaos. "This way! The maintenance shafts lead to the lower levels, closer to the core." They sprinted down a service corridor, the metal walls groaning under the strain of the collapsing network. A squad of Kess's reptilian shock troops rounded the corner ahead, blocking their path. They were trapped. Then with a hydraulic hiss, a heavy blast door slammed down between them and their pursuers, sealing the mercenaries off. Cade stared. "Luck!" Vareth didn't question it. "Keep moving." It happened again. As they raced toward a junction swarming with Torvin's men, the corridor lights flickered and died, plunging the mercenaries into absolute darkness. Cade and Vareth, guided by her faint bioluminescence, slipped past them unnoticed. This wasn't luck. This was deliberate. On his wrist-mounted datapad, Cade saw a ghost signal flicker, a low-level access code originating from the Luminari Educational Network. A system so basic, so underfunded it shared infrastructure with the station's emergency bulkheads. It didn't make sense, until it did. Syl. He could almost see her, hidden in the embassy safe room, her small fingers flying across a terminal, mimicking the patterns she'd watched him use. She wasn't just hiding, she was fighting. They were almost to the primary reactor lift when they were finally cornered. Torvin's lieutenant, a man with a face like a closed fist, stood before them. his heavy pulse rifle leveled at Varys' chest. "End of the line, traitor." As his finger tightened on the trigger, the charging lights on his rifle, and on those of his entire squad, winked out. A dead metallic click was the only sound. The lieutenant stared at his useless weapon in disbelief. At that same moment, a brilliant pulsating sapphire light flared from a nearby ventilation grate, a luminary bioluminescent distress signal, amplified and broadcast. It was Syl. Before the mercenaries could even draw their sidearms, a squad of loyalist station security, drawn by the signal, swarmed the corridor, their weapons hot. "Drop them! Now!" The conspirators were disarmed and swarmed in seconds. Cade stared at the grate, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was awed. He was humbled. This child, acting on nothing but raw courage and an unshakable trust in them, had just wielded a fragment of the system as a weapon, a shield, and a beacon. She had done what he'd spent 3 years terrified to do: risk everything to save someone. In that moment, the ghost of his past felt a little less heavy. The doors to the reactor core blasted open, revealing a cavernous chamber dominated by the monolithic fusion reactor, its surface shimmering with containment fields that barely held back a star's worth of energy. A catastrophic hum filled the air, a death song getting louder with every second. On a massive display, red digits bled across the screen. 5817. "I can't access the shutdown protocols. The infection has them in a digital chokehold," one of the engineers yelled over the din, his hands flying uselessly over a console. "The manual overrides are fuse solid." Cade was already jacking his interface into the primary mainframe, his own code flooding his vision. It was a fortress, a perversion of his own design. Every defensive algorithm he'd ever written now turned into a spike on a wall he couldn't climb. Then a shadow moved. From the gantries above, a colossal shape detached itself from the station's architecture. A Class 4 maintenance exoframe, a 10-ton monster of industrial steel and hydraulic claws, dropped to the floor with a ground-shaking boom. Inside its reinforced cockpit, a face contorted with righteous fury stared back at them. "Torvin. You're too late, Ghost," his voice boomed from the Exo's external speakers. "The future of humanity is finally at hand." The machine lunged. "Cade, the code! We'll hold him off!" Varith yelled, igniting a blade of pure plasma from her wrist guard. She moved like a dancer of light and death, her lithe form weaving around the exoframe's brutal, sweeping attacks, her plasma blade scoring molten gashes across its armored limbs. The engineers joined her, their industrial tools turned into desperate weapons. Cade ignored them, his entire world shrinking to the cascading lines of corrupted data. He fought his own ghost, his own genius. For every backdoor he tried, a Cerberus-based logic bomb was waiting. For every firewall he breached, the infection rerouted and rebuilt itself stronger. He was losing. "Do you know how it felt, watching you build the perfect shield?" Torvin's voice taunted, his exoframe swatting an engineer aside like a fly. "All that power, and you wanted to use it to protect. You refused to see it for what it was. The perfect sword. The one that would secure humanity's rightful dominance." A massive hydraulic claw slammed into the gantry above Cade, raining sparks down around him. "So I took it," Torvin snarled. "That battle group at Cerberus? That was me. I showed the universe what your work was truly capable of, and I framed the one man who was too weak to use it himself." The words hit Cade like a physical blow. The last 3 years of guilt, the face of his fiancée in his nightmares, the 350 souls he thought he had failed. It all crashed down on him. His creation, his weapon, his sin. His fingers froze over the interface, the weight of it all finally breaking him. He was a monster who built monsters. He was about to pull back, to let the end come, when Varith's voice cut through the noise and his despair like a bolt of lightning. She dodged under a crushing stomp from the exoframe, her own bioluminescence flaring with defiance. "Cade, listen to me!" she screamed, her eyes locking on his. "You didn't build a weapon, you built a shield. He corrupted it. Now take it back." Varith's words were a key turning a lock in his soul. Take it back. The guilt, the shame, the years of running. It all burned away into fuel. He wasn't a monster. He was the architect, and this was his house. A cold, predatory calm settled over him. His fingers didn't just move, they danced with lethal purpose. He stopped trying to dismantle the virus. He stopped trying to diffuse it. Instead, with a cascade of keystrokes that were pure instinct, he unleashed the ghost in his own machine. Back doors he'd built into Cerberus as a final, desperate fail-safe. Keys only he possessed sprang open. He wasn't deleting the infection. He was seizing the throne. Across the chamber, Vareth saw the change in him. Seeing her opening, she screamed, "Now! The primary knee joint!" An engineer using a high-powered plasma cutter sliced through the exoframe's leg hydraulics as Vareth's blade seared the joint from the other side. The 10-ton machine buckled, dropping to one knee with a screech of protesting metal. On Cade's monitors, the red cascade of collapsing code began to shift. Blue lines, his lines, shot through the infection, not fighting it, but commanding it. He plunged his will into the system, hijacking the countdown itself. The catastrophic overload sequence twisted under his control, rewriting itself into a controlled emergency shutdown. The station's lights, which had been flickering wildly, suddenly held steady. The klaxons sputtered and died. The hum of the failing life support in the lower deck stabilized into a healthy, rhythmic thrum. Torvin felt the shift, roaring in fury as he tried to regain control of the exoframe. But it was too late. Vareth, using the momentary stability, vaulted onto the machine's chassis, slid across its chest, and slammed the butt of her plasma guard into the cockpit's emergency release. With a hiss of depressurization, the canopy blew open. The loyalist engineers swarmed the crippled machine, pulling the defeated, screaming Torvin from the wreckage. Cade's eyes were locked on the timer. 3, 2, 1, 0. Silence. A profound station-wide silence. The catastrophic scream of the reactor core didn't end in a bang, but in a deep, resonant sigh. The containment fields shimmered, their angry red glow softening to a stable, peaceful blue. Nexus Station was saved, and then a new sound began. Faint at first, a distant murmur picked up by the core's audio sensors. It grew, swelling from a whisper into a roar. In habitation rings, in docking bays, in crowded med centers, thousands of beings, human, luminari, and 100 others, were watching the public broadcasts. They had seen the code on the screens. They had seen Cade's face, etched with a frantic, brilliant focus. And now they were cheering, a wave of thunderous, grateful, awestruck celebration for the human ghost who had just pulled their world back from the brink of annihilation. The wave of cheering that had saved them became a tidal wave of justice that cleansed two star systems. The evidence Cade had broadcast was irrefutable. It dismantled Terra Ascendant from the inside out and led to a mutiny against the luminary warlord Kess, who was turned over to the Alliance by his own disgusted lieutenants. In the days that followed, Nexus Station was a whirlwind of repairs, political tribunals, and newfound hope. For Cade, the official vindication came via a secure channel directly from Earth's High Command. His court-martial was expunged. The record of the Cerberus disaster was publicly and humiliatingly corrected. He wasn't a traitor who failed. He was the architect who was betrayed. He was offered a full reinstatement, promotions, medals, a hero's welcome. The Alliance Council went even further, creating a new position just for him. Chief Security Architect for the entire treaty, a permanent seat on Nexus Station. But the commendations and titles felt distant, like echoes from a life he no longer lived. The real victory was quieter. It was in the diplomatic suite, watching Syl sit cross-legged on the floor, a datapad in her lap. She wasn't playing a game. She was tracing the logic gates of a simple security system Cade had given her to study. Her bioluminescent patterns, once flickering with fear, now pulsed with a steady, bright curiosity. Vareth entered, her political authority now unshakable, the leader who had held the Alliance together. But she moved not with the weight of a high consul, but with the simple grace of a woman coming home. She looked at Cade, then at her daughter, and a soft smile touched her lips. Syl looked up from her work, her bright eyes finding Cade's. "My human papa?" she said, the words as natural as breathing. Can you show me the recursive loop again? Cade's throat tightened. He knelt beside her. The ghost of his past finally laid to rest. He had spent 3 years believing his hands only brought ruin, that his very existence was poison to those he cared for. But as he looked at the powerful, loving woman who stood beside him and the brilliant child who trusted him without question, he understood. His skills, his heart, his very soul, they were never meant to destroy. They were meant to protect. He hadn't just saved a station, he had found his purpose. He had found his family. 8 months later, Nexus Station was a symphony of light and motion, reborn. Its central plaza, once a scene of chaos, now featured a new memorial. A silent, looping hologram of a human hacker's hands flying across a console. The moment Cade Chen stabilized the reactor core, an eternal reminder that heroes could be found in the shadows. Cade's office was no longer a hidden server room, but a bright, transparent workspace with a panoramic view of the station's thriving heart. He sat at his terminal, no longer the Ghost Protocol, but the station's chief digital guardian. Syl sat not beside him, but on the edge of his desk, her small legs swinging as she pointed a glowing finger at his screen. Her bioluminescence pulsed with focused concentration. The subroutine has a logic flaw, she stated, her voice clear and confident. It creates a vulnerability if the primary authentication fails 3 times. See, Papa? Cade smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest that had become as constant as his own heartbeat. He looked at the code, then at her, his brilliant apprentice. The door chimed softly and Vareth entered. The weight of her diplomatic authority was gone, replaced by the simple grace of a woman coming home. She placed a hand on Cade's shoulder, her touch a familiar current of love and peace. Their union, formalized in both human and luminary custom, was now a celebrated symbol of the very alliance they had saved. Together, the 3 of them looked out at the bustling station, a living mosaic of species working, living, and thriving side by side. Cade thought of the man he was, the ghost hiding from a past he couldn't outrun. He had made a single choice to save one lost child, and that choice had unraveled his entire world, only to weave it back together into something more beautiful and stronger than he could have ever imagined. It led him from isolation to purpose, from guilt to redemption, and from loneliness to a family. He reached out, and his scarred hands, once symbols of failure and trauma, gently took hold of Vareth's elegant fingers and Syl's small, glowing hand. 3 different beings, one unbreakable bond. He came to the station to hide. He stayed to save it, and in doing so, he saved himself.